get overwhelmed with gratitude when I think about how he has allowed me to go through this. And I don't look like what I've been through. Because I know people that died in it. I know ain't nothing like you can watch it on the news. You can see it on the Facebook articles. I know people that have died at the hands of their abusers. I know people that have lost family members in Katrina. I know people that have lost their minds in divorces or they never recovered. And I'm so grateful that that wasn't my testimony. He didn't have to do that to me. I caused a lot of this. My own ambition, my own lust, my own whatever. So Samantha is a New Orleanian. She's a mother. She is a Jesus girl. She is a boss. She is resilience personified. That's Samantha. You know, because your reference point growing up in New Orleans is New Orleans, you don't realize that you're growing up in New Orleans. You know what I mean? Like the New Orleans. But life was cultured. Life was vibrant. Life was full of community and essence, no pun intended. New Orleans is just a very, very special place. And I was surrounded by amazing people, an amazing church family, amazing blood family. And I had exponential opportunities presented to me, everything from being a co-host on Kid Watch with Hold a Copy. I didn't know who Hold a Copy was then. I know she was going to grow up to be like, well, she was an adult then, but I didn't know she was going to go on to be a nationwide renowned, news anchor. I didn't know that and understand that doing musical plays with Delphio and Marcellus and the Ellis family, I was around jazz legends. So growing up there was just incredible. You have to be from New Orleans to know that the best things about New Orleans are absolutely free. Tourists come down there and they want to do a lot of things. You don't need no money to have fun in New Orleans. All you got to do is walk around and breathe in the culture. You know what I mean? If you on St. Peter's, if you on Bourbon, if you're on Canal, if you walk the river, if you walk Eldridge Point, the best thing about New Orleans is the people. We are what make the city, and we are free. I was there during Hurricane Katrina. I was sitting out for a semester because I also was a student at Xavier University of Louisiana. And when Katrina hit, when you're from the city, hearing about a hurricane, that happens every single year. They always say, it's kind of like Fred Sanford, oh, this is the big one, Elizabeth, It's always the big one. So we didn't know the catastrophe that Katrina was set out to be. And people will say, oh, well, how could you not know? Forecast was coming, they told you the category, they told you this. Yeah, but they always say that. So, and normally the hurricanes come up right to the city, they turn left, they turn to the right, and they go to Galveston, they go to, Florida Panhandle. This one hit us head on. So it was different. I think I didn't realize that it was real until the day the storm was scheduled to hit, that Sunday. I remember driving to church because my church still had service, and the roads were empty, and there was such an eerie silence. A lot of buildings had already shut off the electricity. The apartment complex where my mother and I lived, they had already turned off the water. So we were already living in impoverished conditions before we got a single drop of rain. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, this is really, I'm gonna have to brace myself for this. And by the time the storm hit, I felt a little bit of relief because I'm like, okay, I'm about to get it over with. Like, I go to sleep and I'll wake up and it'll be over. That's typically what I'm used to with a hurricane. And I went to sleep and I woke up and it was just starting. And when I say just starting, not the rain, not the winds, not the flooding, that had already happened. But the breach of the levee didn't happen until the following morning. And that's when the city went into complete pandemonium. So I recall being fast. I was at my boyfriend's house instead of being with my mama. And the night before, she had decided to go home, and I decided to stay. But God wastes nothing, because had I not been there, he and his family would have had no true out, because it was my determination to get back to my mother that gave us the pivot to get out of harm's way. We were in the 7th ward off of St. Bernard, and as the flood waters began to rise, when we realized we had to get out of the house, we were listening to the radio. We were hearing horror stories about people who were stuck in their homes. And they had already told us, first responders are not going to be available. And the radio hosts were telling people, find an axe, get a knife, cut a hole in the roof, sit on your roof until a helicopter can get you. That was the rescue advice. And hearing that puts a different level of realization in your spirit. Like, you shouldn't have to fight your way out of this. And that's exactly what we did. When we left the house, I remember thinking that somebody was popping popcorn, because the tile, just like there's tile on this floor, there were small wooden squares that were popping up like popcorn one by one, because the water was rising. Not because it was raining, the water was rising. At this point, there wasn't a cloud in the sky. And so when we left out of the house, by the time we got to the bare ground, the water was up to my chest in the street. Not only that, it was dark. So I couldn't tell you what I was walking in on, if it was a hole, if it was an animal. I don't know what it was. But I know that I remember my boyfriend at the time, his aunt wrapped her flood papers and everything that she could in a Tupperware bin, and she left the rest of her life behind on that house in the corner of Allen Street in the 7th ward. And we walked up the incline on the interstate, the St. Bernard exit. We got to the top, and I thought I saw a church member driving by, and I flagged him down. It wasn't the church member, but we went ahead and asked if they can give us a ride closer to the Superdome. So that was the plan, to try to cross the Mississippi River Bridge to get to my house. But by the time we got to the Superdome, we were tired, so we were just gonna go there. But we were greeted by soldiers with AR-15s that did not seem very welcoming. That was not the welcome committee we bargained for. So we moseyed on past there. And you can see police officers riding down the street in brand new Escalades, because they hit up the Cadillac dealership. And I remember looking at the Hyatt Hotel as far as my eyes could see, and I could see blankets and mattresses and busted windows. And I thought to myself, this looks like The Day After Tomorrow. Like, this legitimately looks like a movie, and it feels like a bad dream. I remember a police officer giving us a ride to the West Bank, and we walked off of the exit, the General de Gaulle exit, past the Fisher Projects, which is where my dad grew up, to my grandmother's house. Now, I don't know about your grandma, but everybody's grandma will leave something open. There's this one window they leave open. They leave the key under the pot. I knew how to get in my grandmother's house. And so we went in there. She had thankfully that side of the city had no flood water, just down trees. And we were able to kind of like gain our footing there, rest up, wash up, get the dirt off of us a little bit. No run of water, but she had jugs of water. It was like a moment of Goshen, a moment of refuge. And I remember my cousin Murphy, Lord rest his soul, was driving down the street in the neighborhood, and I asked him for a ride home. He brought me as far as he could, but we were blocked by a tree, and we got out, and I was going to walk the rest of the way. Well, we began to walk, and I heard gunshots, and I thought people were running, and that scared all of us. Come to find out, a police officer was killed. That was the first police officer murder that happened during the looting was what I was hearing. And so I found a police officer that was willing to give me a ride all the way to the house so that I could get there safely. I got there and I was so excited to get there. I left my purse in the car with my house keys, and my mother had gone out to look for me. I, for the first time, lost every ounce of fight once I got to the house and couldn't get in the door. And it wasn't a good 10 minutes before I could get into a good sulk that my mother pulled up. She pulled up, she had gotten a grill, she had gathered some of the church people, and there was about 15 of us that piled up in our 2-bedroom apartment. A tree had fallen in their house, a family of about 8 people. And the grandmother, the husband and wife, and the kids and the grandkids, all of us piled up in our apartment, and we waited for our pastor at the time to give us instructions on how we would commute from there. And so the following day, we piled up in our broken and tattered cars with bursted windshields and, cracked windows, and we went to Delta Downs, Louisiana, a resort out there. And we actually had church in the attic up there. We had church. And I remember I cried and I thank God for letting me get out of that. But I also promised him that I would, if anything catastrophic ever happened, I would never leave my mother again. Not for nothing. That was the scariest feeling that I ever had, because for a second I didn't know. What if she had evacuated to another city? The phone lines were down, cell phones weren't working. I didn't know if I would ever see her again for just a moment. And even for just a moment, that was traumatic. Our pastor at the time, he gathered us, and so when we were in Delta Downs, it was a casino resort that one of the church members had a connection with. And we all went in there, and we went to what they call the upper room. How befitting. And we had a church service, no instruments, no choir, no fancy clothes. I wore the same clothes for 3 days. I went to Augusta with the same clothes, Augusta, Georgia, with the same clothes that I had on pre-storm. And I remember standing in the shower for what felt like forever. So, I live what I would consider a decent life, but I take nothing for granted. I don't take clean water for granted. I don't take the clothes on my back for granted. I don't take a cool room for granted when you experience things like that. You know what I mean? So I'm just grateful. The church that I was going to at the time had several locations, and one of the mother church was actually located in Augusta, Georgia. Ironically enough, we went to Augusta every year for what we call the Holy Convocation. So I was familiar with a lot of the members there, and I had developed some relationships there, but never in a million years did I think I would become a resident. But, the transition there felt like home. It was night and day compared to New Orleans, Louisiana, and after what I had gone through, I was very much so open to that. And nothing happens by accident. So I stayed there for 20 years. Some people went back home, but if you give me resources long enough, eventually I'm going to make that home. And that's exactly what I did. And God prospered us. He allowed us to redeem majority of what we lost and then some. There were resources there to help defray the cost of, rental deposits. And I remember Dillard's was giving us, if you said that you were a Hurricane Katrina victim back then, that was good as cash in hand. They were so assisting. And we were not poor stewards over those blessings. I saw a lot of people from New Orleans really benefit. Houses were given, cars were given, clothing, you name it, They helped us rebuild. So people can say what they want to say about Augusta being like a quaint, maybe even country city. You call it the country all you want to. That country city helped my mother and I rebuild on broken pieces. So I'm grateful for it. There was a bit of a crossroad when we went to the Delta Downs. I remember his aunt at that time left and went to Texas, and he was supposed to go to Texas with her. But then, as being so in love, he came to Augusta, Georgia. But nothing wastes. God wastes nothing. He eventually found his wife there, and they're now married with beautiful children. So, just because it wasn't meant for us then doesn't mean it was accidental. But that phase of life, people grow into different people. I'm glad that he's become who he is today. At that point in time, he was an extremely troubled young man. And as a result, that is one of the things that introduced me to another phase of my testimony, which involves being in domestic violence relationships. That was my first experience with that. And little did I know it wouldn't be the last. We were young. We were very young. He had a lot of things in his personal life that troubled him. I felt like at the time I had savior complex. I thought I could heal, fix anything and anybody. And I didn't understand my worth or my responsibility. And that was not my responsibility. And once the Lord allowed me to safely make my exodus from that situation, I never truly healed from it. I didn't know what healing looked like. Mental health was not in the forefront. Healing, self-awareness was not the mantra, then. And so if you don't really face or confront what it is that you're dealing with internally, you'll find yourself meeting the same person in different bodies. And that's exactly what I did. I left that relationship, but I didn't leave the toxicity or my addiction or attraction to it. I ended up getting married extremely young, 21, and I became a mother. None of what I regret. I stayed in that marriage for close to 10 years. And while that marriage was not physically abusive, it was extremely emotionally abusive. The name calling, the infidelity, all of that weighs on you in surfaces in ways that you can't even imagine. It chips away at your spirit. And so then you begin to accept certain things as normal. And I normalize things that I should have held a standard to. And I can blame whomever. I can say I wasn't taught, or I wasn't exposed, or I didn't have examples of what healthy marriage looked like around me. And that all could be well and true. But I was also searching for fulfillment in a role of a wife and mother when I hadn't really gained a full understanding of who I was, what my purpose was, and how to navigate life as an individual before I tried to allow someone who probably had those same discrepancies in their own identity to try to, now I'm submitting to that. You don't know who you are, and you're trying to tell me who I am. And I'm accepting it and believing it when neither one of us have done the work individually to really understand our purpose and how we can enhance another person. And so while that wasn't, I wouldn't label that as domestic violence per se, but abuse in its own right is still abuse. I'm one of those people, I don't care if it's financial, if it's emotional, verbal, physical, all those things are still abuse if you're being mistreated. And so when I turned 30, the light bulb came on for me. I began to see my talents. I began to see my success in the workplace. I began to see how everything that I set my hand to do, how God was allowing it to prosper. And the light bulb was that I don't have to be attached to anybody in order to walk in this. This level of favor is not being bestowed on me because of any individual. it's not even bestowed upon me because of me. This is just God's grace. And with this grace, I learned that anyone who's going to cause me to cower or box myself in as a result is not a good fit. And I chose me, and I filed for divorce. But the fact of the matter is I still hadn't done the work. I was getting the enlightenment, but I hadn't done the work. So immediately after that, I began to date. And you kind of want to one up, and you want to seem like he was the one that won. You know what I mean? Like, I remember he had gotten married very recently after the divorce, and so the person I was seeing at the time seemed like a good fit. We were close in age. We shared a lot of commonalities around music and our interests. But he was extremely unhealed, extremely broken. And the record was there. It spoke for itself. The paper trail of, domestic violence was there outside of me. The paper trail of avoiding the police was there. It was there. I just, again, feeling like that I could be the one that was going to make the difference. And I learned very swiftly what narcissistic abuse looks like. And so much so, and I began to deal a lot with the infidelity again. This time it was an ego thing. I didn't want to feel like I was the one that lost. And so I stayed to save face. I stayed because I felt like, I already put it out there and I didn't want to start over again. The fear of the unknown was crippling. And again, still not truly understanding my worth as a woman, I subjected myself to things that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. And I remember the final straw. I don't like to talk a lot about the in-between. Not that the in-between doesn't matter, but I think what's most important for me, what I would tell anybody who went through things similar to what I went through, you'll have to understand where it started, when it started, evaluate that headspace, and then what was your last straw. And if you can really, really deep dive into both of those things, you can put everything in between don't even matter. It matters, but it doesn't. It may help you connect the dot or two. But I remember the first time he laid his hands on me, and I remember when I said enough was enough. And when I said enough was enough, I was literally being held hostage in the house while my kids listened to me being called all sorts of obscenities from another room. They had to go to school, and I couldn't bring them to school. I knew that was not a life that I would want them to be able to grow up and tell. My children are amazing. They've been amazing from birth. And I know every parent thinks that, and every parent says that, but I really mean it. I'm not just talking about their gifts. I'm talking about the Christ in them, the anointing in them, the awareness and the heart that they have. And I thought to myself, what if my children grow up to be in a seat like I'm in today and have to talk about their lives? And I would have to sit and listen to the contribution that I made while I allowed a man that wasn't even their father cause them to lose sleep because they had to hear their mother being cussed out all night. Or they heard their mother screaming and crying from another room and felt completely helpless behind the door, wondering if she would be okay, hearing crashing and maybe seeing scratches or unexplained bruises. That can't be part of their story. Not for my stupidity, so the last straw was the day we were held hostage. And I was late for work, they were late for school. I think he saw that I was calling the police and ended up just letting me go because he didn't want to be bothered with the police. And I remember my leg was shaking like a leaf on a tree involuntarily. I drove to my mother's house because she had given me warnings. Mamas always know. She warned me, and I cried and I apologized. And she loved me back to life. She loved me back to life. And I feel like my next bout with domestic violence, was almost like God's way of saying, like, I'm gonna get you one more time so you know, like you kind of stumbled on this land. This time it's be like you gonna know. This time you're walking out with the victory. And last and final, or most recent and last and final, was my ex-husband. You know, during the pandemic, I decided that I was gonna do things my way. I felt like I was a good church girl. I tried to do things the church girl way. You know, have the husband first and get married, you know, keep myself not be all over everybody, you know, a garden tool, so to speak. And this time, I still wasn't a garden tool, but this time I was gonna do things my way. I didn't want no more of the preacher seeming individuals. I wanted me just a good hood dude that kind of go to church a little bit. That's all I wanted. Because the church dudes I was done with. And so felt like I had gotten that, but I didn't really know him. And the pandemic played a large part in that, because you don't see who people are if you are in quarantine and you're not in social settings, you're not engaging with other people. And there was a lot that was hidden. And when it came to the light, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Ironically, the first moment that I saw the face mask come off, I was already pregnant. Now that was uncharacteristic of me. I didn't believe in being pregnant out of wedlock, but again, I was in this phase of I'm gonna do it my way. And if it don't happen in order, or if it don't happen the way people feel like it's supposed to happen, then oh well. You know, I was rebellion. I was in rebellion. I was defending my mother. And he called my mother, not in her presence, but in my presence, a B word. And I'm pregnant and I'm upset, and he's, you know, not happy with whatever it is that's going on with my mom. Calls her B word, I get upset. And this time I'm tough stuff. Now I survived a couple of the things, and I'm J-Lo off of enough. I'm in the face, and I got finger pointing. And I was about maybe 3 or 4 months pregnant. I had been bleeding, not related to this situation, but he knew I was. And he pushed me on the ground. He pushed me on the ground. He helped, but in that same push, he helped me up. And he made me feel like I tripped. No, I didn't trip. No, I didn't trip. But, you know, you hear some people, there's a saying where they say, don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining. It was legitimately the definition of manipulation. And because I didn't want to believe that the person that I had fallen for and I had committed to had this side, I went with it. I was like, maybe I did trip. Maybe my equilibrium has been a little off, pregnant. And slowly but surely, throughout the pregnancy, I was being isolated from my mother. I was being isolated from family and friends that wanted the best for me. And I didn't really see it because I was also being given a lot of attention, like the pregnancy attention. And I didn't have that in my previous with my first husband. I didn't have, you know, the adoring pregnancy. I longed for that. And he gave me that this time. But soon to follow, when our responsibilities increased after we worked together to try to purchase a home, the financial contributions just stopped. Then it became the verbal disrespect increased. And then when I stood up for myself, that's when everything will come to a head and it will become physical. And I remember the first time it became physical in that situation. We were arguing and he had called me out of my name, and me taking a stand for myself. This is my house, you can get out. And he choked me. pinned me down while I had my baby in my arms, and he choked me. And believe it or not, you'll be surprised at how many people don't feel like there's an off limits when it comes down to a man putting their hands on a woman. A lot of people are like, well, you kind of brought that on yourself because men don't like to hear that. And that perspective, even though I know it's completely wrong, in that moment, it gave me a little bit of a, well, maybe I brought this on myself. And so for that reason, I stayed. And I was like, well, if it ever happened again, it happened again. It happened again. I think maybe the fourth time was when I said, never again. But in between that, the disrespect never stopped. It became a normal thing for my children. At this point, God has blessed me. I'm living in the biggest house that I've ever had. It may not be big to everybody. It was big to me. Living in the biggest house. I'm working a job that I've made more money on than I've ever made. I'm in a new city. Again. And I felt like I couldn't do it by myself. So I stayed. Now I got this baby. Now I'm 2 baby daddies in, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm looking at the demographics. I'm like, God, I can't do this again. Like, we got to figure this out. God was like, not only can you do it again, you're going to do it again. And he showed me just how much. He was like, I had you when you had half of this. I'm going to give you all of this. I'm going to increase you, enlarge your territory. I'm going to show you how I still got you. And I had to realize this person isn't contributing financially. They're not contributing emotionally or spiritually. And they're also physically abusive. Now, if 2 + 2 = 4, the math is mathing. You can do bad by yourself. And I was like, oh, I finally stopped calling the bluff. Your family members are saying, you literally not giving them a consequence. What are you doing? And they're right, because again, I'm trying to play God in somebody else's life. Be their healer. That's not my responsibility. I had to heal myself. And healing myself didn't mean, I'm just so broken and torn and bruised that I'm just this horrible person. I'm still a good person. Still going to church with a smile on my face. Still going to work with a smile on my face. Stressed out. But I'm still functioning with all of this chaos in my life and no peace. And so when I finally buckled down and filed a restraining order, and I put myself in a position to have to do it all by myself, and not a hair was singed on my head, then I was like, oh God, this is what you was talking about. I didn't need anybody to maintain little, and I don't need anybody to maintain plenty when you're my source. And so I allowed myself to just relinquish the fear of being alone, relinquish the fear of embarrassment, relinquish the fear of retaliation, because that's a real thing too. I'm a bad girl from NOLA now. I don't play, but I'm also no match for a man. I recognize that. And sometimes we don't have to go far to see stories about men that will come back in such a retaliatory way that it could be even fatal. And these were thoughts that would play in my brain. And I thought to myself, you can't call yourself a believer, and this is called my testimony is dope, so I'm assuming that this is for believers. You can't call yourself a believer, and out of that same mouth that you're confessing your faith with, you're also being confined by fear. Confession of faith and confinement by fear do not match. And when I made the decision to let go of that fear by any means, God allowed me to see just how good it could get. even just a little bit. I'm not saying, trust me, I believe that it's better. But I'm telling you, I'm also telling anybody who finds themselves in a domestic violence situation, there is no benefit in staying. I don't care. I don't care what the breakdown look like. There's no benefit in staying. I don't care how many children you got, together or separate. I don't care how much of the bills they pay. I am daring you to just really trust God, even if it don't look like it. I'm gonna tell you this, and the final straw for me. The final straw. I was already kind of done. You know what I mean? Women, we're done before we're done. Our spouse may not know, but when we're done, we've been done for a minute. You know what I mean? My final straw, I had gone to the divorce court. And even prior to that, I sat down one day. I was being cussed out so bad. And I sat in my daughter's bed and I said, God, if you want me to stay in this relationship, I'll stay. But if you want me to leave, give me a sign. I got up, I walked downstairs, I went to the microwave and I grabbed the handle. My wedding ring broke in half. The diamonds that were on the top detached from the band. And you tell me if that's a sign. Was it plain enough? You know, like it's like asking God for a sign. You walk outside and then the exit sign is false. So the day that I accepted that, I tried to go file. And I don't know how long you've been in Atlanta, but there was a period of time where Fulton County systems were down. Traffic tickets, everything, like you couldn't do nothing. So I gone to court and I couldn't file. And I was like, you know what, well, maybe this is my sign. Maybe I should stay. I didn't say that to him, but I said it within myself. Well, I got home and it was a church night. He wanted me to comb our daughter's hair and I went to comb it and I wasn't moving fast enough for him. So he was being antagonistic because he had seen on email that I went to the courthouse. And I did that purposely. I want him to see that I'm done. He tried to snatch our daughter from me, and in the process, he scratched her. And I still had a good grip on her. When she started crying, he got upset. He grabbed me by my face, scratched my face, threw me down. Now, mind you, this is after I had a slip and fall, January 2023, my hip, back, all that's messed up. On the hip that's damaged, he threw me down with our daughter in my arms. And he said, out of his mouth, he said, see, this is what you wanted. This is what you wanted. And he called a friend and he began to speak to that friend as though we were fighting while I'm on the ground holding my daughter. He was saying, get off me, get off me. The only thing that saved me from being able to stay or it being a he versus me type thing, my son was in the room picking me up off the floor. And my daughter, she was 13 at the time, came and grabbed her sister and ran to her room and locked the door. I said I would never put my children in that situation again. Here they were in something very similar. That was it. My children should never have to rescue me. I'm a parent. I should be rescuing them. But I realized that out of my own volition, I put myself in a situation. Again, I allowed myself to be opened up without consulting God. I entered into a union without consulting God. And I took the tangible blessings as a sign that he was with me, knowing that I had gone about this completely wrong. And I got up from that floor. I called the police. I filed my police report. I fixed my hair. I wiped the blood. And I went to church. And I sang on the praise team like nothing happened. Not because I'm fake, not because I'm not in touch with reality, but because I'm so in touch with who I am and whose I am. I recognized that at that point I was determined nothing was going to stop me. Not a thing. And it didn't. And while things got lean, and while things got difficult throughout that time period, I never lost anything. I've only gained. And that God put me in a situation where I couldn't give nobody the glory. There was no individual that could take credit for me being able to maintain my home, obtain vehicles, none of that, because it was strictly the favor of God. You know, Tyler Perry has the character, I forget her name, Angela and Marcus. You know, Angela will get that frying pan. She would go upside Marcus' head with anything she could hold. And I would tell myself, you know, I could understand if I was an Angela. You know, if I was a feisty firecracker just popping off, and I'm so like, I'm not perfect, but I'm a mild mannered. I'm little. I ain't the biggest chick. I'm a little thick, whatnot. But you know, but I'm not a match for me. What do y'all get out of this? And so I would ask God, you know, I try to be nice, I try to do good to other people. Why do you allow this to continuously keep happening? But what he did show me was that it wasn't even about me. Oh God, I got chills. What God showed me through this is my availability to him. And I got chills. I'll talk about that. And it's not a put on. I've told God yes in every season in my life, every dark place. I've given him a yes every single time. God, you want to use me? Sure. Yes. You want me to tell my testimony? Sure I will. And so because he knows he can trust me with giving glory back to him, there are people that gone through things like this, they're ashamed to tell it. And who gets free from your silence? Nobody, not even you. You're not free in your silence. I get liberated. When I cried, I didn't expect to cry because obviously I did my makeup before I came here, so I would much rather not. But I get overwhelmed with gratitude when I think about how he has allowed me to go through this. And I don't look like what I've been through because I know people that died in it. I know ain't nothing like, you can watch it on the news, you can see it on the Facebook articles. I know people that have died at the hands of their abusers. I know people that have lost family members in Katrina. Thank you. I know people that have lost their minds in divorces, or they never recovered. And I'm so grateful that that wasn't my testimony. Because he didn't have to do that to me. I caused a lot of this. My own ambition, my own lust, my own whatever it was, that was on me. You know, the Bible says that the thoughts that he thinks about us are thoughts of peace and not of evil, to bring us an expected end. I'm not saying that this wasn't his will concerning my life, but I'm acknowledging the fact that there were so many self-inflicted wounds that could have taken me out. And I'm grateful for his grace. I'm grateful for his mercy. And I don't take it for granted. No day do I take it for granted. No day do I take the ability to be able to tell somebody what happened and be on the other end of it. My pastor says something. I love my pastor so much, Pastor Marmore Jr. He says all the time, when you testify, your testimony should end in victory. And my testimony is a victory. It's not about the monetary gain. My children came out okay. Like, you know, there's some people go through this stuff, their children become bitter towards them. Or their children don't believe in God anymore because they are asking that same question that you just asked me. That's a reality. It's normal. But my side, it's not normal. It's not. And so, girl, that touches me. My daughter saw God in this. She said to me at a table full of people, Mama, you went through the fire and you don't smell like smoke. What more can you ask for? What other prayer can you pray if I must go through If I must go through, then God, be who you are. And he showed me his word made manifest in my life. Going through fire and not to burn, that's biblical. You understand? When my daughter told me those words, I began to, it's like in that moment I saw all of the times where I had to see the pain in her eyes of the situations, the fear. And I had to reassure her when I didn't really know how this was going to end. You know what I mean? And she's had my back. Let me tell you something. I ain't had to off nobody, but if I did, she hit the body, believe that. You know what I mean? Like, she's had my back through this. And God has allowed my children to see his goodness. Because by him causing me to go through it the way that I did, and it's not a put on. I didn't ask for this strength. Believe me, if I could have picked my own testimony, my testimony would have been, me and my husband have been married for 20 years now, white picket fence, like, you know what I'm saying? It would have been something else. I didn't choose this. But my children being able to have their own relationship with God through this experience, it really is just another mark of God's goodness and his grace. I think for me then, I was just so caught up in he's so handsome, and I was excited about being chosen. And then one day it was like, why wouldn't somebody choose you? Have you, not that it's about aesthetics, but have you seen you? And it's not an aesthetic statement, you know what I mean? Which the aesthetics are there, but have you seen the way you mother those children? Have you seen the way you make something out of nothing? Have you seen the way you entreat people? Have you seen the way you connect people? Have you seen the grace? Do you understand like your capabilities? Why wouldn't somebody choose you? You shouldn't be excited because they chose you. You're a no-brainer. You're a no-brainer, sis. Like, duh. You know what I mean? So I think as a kid, I didn't get that. I had people support and praise me. I was always the smart kid. I didn't feel like the most attractive girl. New Orleans this is another topic, but New Orleans is an interesting city, but it's also very a coloristic city. And being a dark-skinned girl with the short hair, that wasn't like, you wasn't first pick. You know what I mean? Like, the fact that we even had to say, everything that's light-skinned ain't cute. Why do we even have to say that? Because it was always like a bonus point. You would even hear people say it, and she light-skinned with good hair, the good hair, you know what I mean? I didn't know my hair was bad, so I think that stigma kind of followed me a lot. I saw it, matriculate in a lot of the relationships that were around me. Like I saw my cousins and my brothers always dated like the Creole or the exotic looking girl. And so I didn't know how to define my beauty. And so I felt like being picked was like a consolation prize. Like that was the award. It's so far from that. It's so far from that. I would start there. You're the prize. Then I would go into building her up about those insecurities, about complexion and hair length and whatever she felt, acne, whatever little phase I was going through. And then I would tell her how gifted she is and how bold she is, and to lean into all of those talents and those hobbies, because I did so much, but I allowed life to distract me. And so I would refocus her and I would snap her out of every insecurity that she had. The season I'm in now, oh my. God has been speaking to me so heavily, like in dreams. He's invoked me to a deeper prayer life. He has surrounded me with some of the most impeccable people that I've ever known. People that love him just as thoroughly and passionately as I do. People that are as cultured and ambitious as I am. And people that value the things that I value. Alignment in values is like chef's kiss. And I don't just mean that as it relates to like relationships. That's also with friendships, sisterhoods, family. He's caused my family to be in a place of growth and development in him. Where my children, just last week, my daughter I went to prayer. We went a 7-day consecration. My daughter went to prayer with me from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. with me. My daughter was in there praying. And she went on her own with her friends from 12 a.m. to 3 a.m. on her own, 15, and my son. But what that shows is they're learning like a sacrifice and a tenacity in their servitude. And that's what my circle looks like. All of them. I have very few people who are not equally as passionate about growing in God as I am. And that, to me, in and of itself, is a mark of how God is getting ready to catapult me. Like, I can feel it. I'll rise up every day with excitement. I have so much peace. I don't care how many bills, notices I get. I have so much peace. I never work. I'm like, God is in your hands. And you know what he does? He makes ways. I need you to hear me. I have not worked a job since January 11th of 2023. When that situation happened, my job, truth be told, they were conspiring to fire me, and I know they were. They had brought up some evidence against me and I had never been written up in all 3 years that I've been there. The next day, God orchestrated this. The next day, I went to the airport to go get a rental car for work, to travel to a town that was hit with a Category 4 tornado in the time span that I would have been driving on those roads. But I fell at that airport. And because I was fulfilling a work function, it was considered a workers' compensation claim. I have not worked a job. I'm talking about me who back when I first got married was working 3-4 jobs. Kept a side hustle. 2-3 jobs minimum. Never rested. I've not worked a job since January 11th. It is now July of 2025. And I've not worked a job. I have never been able to say that in my life. But I'm able to pour back into my children. I'm able to serve in my ministry. And guess what? What I do? Is anybody available to come to? Is there anybody who wants to come to? You know why? Because I remember a day I couldn't do it. My schedule didn't permit. I hated missing work because of church. I hated missing church because of work. I remember what that felt like. And God has put me in a place to be able to serve him without restriction. And that is exactly what I'm going to do. No restriction. Not on my time, not on my tithe, not on my talent, not on anything. But it started with a fall. The fall was not the failure. The fall was a setup. All of my falls were setups. All of them. Everything that I thought was like a slip and fall. He made it tangible. He showed me. He showed me tangibly what he can do with a fall. First, natural and spiritual. It's the Bible. If I can make your natural fall pay you, imagine what I can do to your spiritual fall. All you gotta do is get up and let me do the rest. That's all I did. That's all I did. I fell. I couldn't get up on my own. I needed help. I went to they took me in an ambulance to the hospital. I went through my therapy, and to this day, I still have pain. To this day, I could feel the impacts of it. But with the naked eye, you can't see it. If I were to walk in and I told you I was disabled, you'd be like, where? I'm disabled. But the disability isn't about I'm disabled. He's able. He is able. My disability ain't got nothing to do with him. I've been disabled. All these testimonies were about my disabilities. And every ending ended with his ability. God allowed one of the things that I have been praying for to manifest on my birthday. I'm talking about I was praying for a breakthrough miracle, and that miracle came through on the day, not around my birthday, on it. Jesus himself told me happy birthday. So this birthday means for me that I'm just getting started. I'm just getting started. This season isn't about, I'm going to reflect, but I'm going to also recognize that I'm in a season of perpetual blessings. And I'm not going to let the enemy make me feel like, oh, well, it's going to end, it's going to stop, or you're going to see. The devil is a liar. I will never see domestic violence again. I won't ever, if I never said it out of my mouth before, I'm declaring it today, which I know I have, but for the record, for the world to see, or whoever's going to watch this live, I will never, or this recording, I will never see domestic violence again. I will never suffer lack or poverty again. I will never have to live in fear again. Neither will my children have to watch me live in fear again. I have not seen the best days of my life. And when I say, not only have I not seen, but eyes have not seen nor ear heard the things that God had prepared for me. I know this because every time I've fallen, all he did was set up an audience. It's not about for people to see so they can mock or taunt. It's about what people can see so they can see the rise. But what you cannot deny is the radiance that God placed on me after that. I hear it every day. Oh, you gotta glow, you gotta glow, you gotta glow. It ain't the face wash, it ain't the moisturizer. It is Jesus himself. And I'm not saying it to sound deep. Like, I can't take credit. So that's what this chapter is about. It's about allowing God's glory to radiate and accepting the fact that this is just the beginning. I'll be coming out with a book soon. I'm not going to release the title just yet because I'm kind of vacillating between two, but it is going to be, God is putting a lot in my spirit. He's putting, I want to do a progressive app for domestic violence survivors, just things. Sometimes you don't want to tell everybody what you're going through, but hearing the words come from somebody who's been there, just like a guide to kind of overcome the narcissism and reframe your experiences and rebuild confidence, strategies, affirmations, all that kind of stuff. But before we get to all of that, let's just stay connected and grow in God together. I am Samantha Danielle Sam Says on Facebook, Samantha Danielle Sam Says on TikTok, Samantha Danielle Sam Says on Instagram. It's Samantha Danielle _ Sam Says on Instagram. And meantime, in between time, you just get to watch me enjoy life with my children, enjoy life and serve God with my church family, And I know some pretty amazing people. So when you connect to me, you get connected to them too.
So last and final question, finish the sentence. My testimony is dope because
My testimony is dope because God gets the glory.